The story opens with a young man taking his last breaths on a battlefield, overhearing his enemies casually chatting about green tea. Suddenly, a jolt wakes him up, and he looks around, bewildered, as a radio announcement warns everyone to be careful of the glare on a sunny day. He slowly sits up, realizing it was just a dream. But what surprises him is the clarity of everything he remembers, including losing his arm right there in the dream. A soldier from the top bunk passes him a piece of paper, asking him to sign it. Keiji takes the paper, still lost in thought, about how he doesn't want to die in a dream without ever having been on a real battlefield. Looking at the paper, he complains to his comrade that he'd already signed it. His friend, Jin, ignores his protest, just telling him to hurry up and sign the paper. Jin explains it's a signed confession for stealing liquor from the PX, and they'll use it to get booze for a party tonight. He goes on to say that after the war, they'll submit this confession, signed by whoever dies in battle. Although Jin's plan seems perfect, Keiji still doesn't understand why they have to follow this tradition, since they're heading out to the battlefield this afternoon. Jin leans down from his bunk to look at Keiji and says he must have misunderstood, because the party is tonight, and they're shipping out tomorrow. Keiji is surprised to hear this, as he clearly remembers it was decided last night that they'd stay back for an attack instead of joining the party. Keiji's strange attitude worries Jin, who says he understands Keiji's anxiety, since this will be his first time on the battlefield, but that he should relax a bit. Keiji starts to realize it might have all been a dream, and now he's truly panicking. But he's a gunner, preparing for his first battle tomorrow, so in his own words, he needs to calm down. Humanity is currently in a frantic war, not against each other, but against hideous monsters called mimics. No one knows the origin of these gruesome creatures or what they truly are, but one thing is for sure. They are on a mission to annihilate the human race. The older folks compare this battle to a science fiction movie, but for him, it's just another Tuesday. The war has been going on since he was a child. Humans created the United Defense Force to fight these monsters, but the long, grueling war has worn everyone down. He remembers hearing that the mimics had attacked Okinawa and that people all over the world are slowly becoming prey to these monstrous beings. Even Japan is under attack by the mimics, with the battle concentrated at the frontline base on the Boso Peninsula. Japan stands alone as the only industrialized nation capable of producing the composite armor needed for the combat jackets. To protect this vital industrial asset, the army has deployed a special military unit, led by the female General Rita Vertasky, commander of the U.S. Special Forces. Rita's elite squad is famous for their victories against the mimics, and he is about to stand with that very unit in a legendary battle. However, his train of thought is cut short when Jin gets down from his bunk and tells him everything will be fine as long as he just comes back without shooting anyone in the back, because that would be really tough if he kept worrying about it so much. Jin goes on to say that the people who come out of battle with their sanity intact are the weird ones, and he needs to be more like their sergeant, who's worked out his muscles so much his brain has shrunk. Jin flinches as the sergeant suddenly speaks right into his ear, asking if he wants some extra training. Snapping to attention, Jin quickly salutes his sergeant, Bartolome Farrell, who demands he repeat what he just said about his mind. Jin fumbles, tripping over his words and replying that he was just telling Keiji about his strong spirit. Ignoring him, Farrell turns to the rest of the men and says that the 17th unit will assemble at 0900 hours sharp. He tells them to pass the word along to everyone. The soldiers just stand there, confused about what he just said. Farrell yells at them to repeat his order, and they quickly follow his instructions. He goes on to inform them that their unit had a surprise inspection, and the inspection team found numerous deficiencies in their equipment. Everyone is shocked to hear this, but ignoring them, Farrell continues, saying the base commander is furious because the U.S. Special Forces are here. Jin objects that it's not their fault, and his comrades back up his argument. Farrell retorts that they should have been more careful and then leaves without another word. The soldiers are wondering what kind of punishment they'll get since they have to go into battle tomorrow. Keiji steps up, saying it'll definitely be physical training. Jin is surprised by his answer, and Keiji tells him that he saw it in his dream, and they're going to have to do push-ups for 3 hours. His answer startles everyone, and they hope that dream doesn't come true. Later that day, they were all forced to do push-ups, and while struggling to hold the position, Jin angrily repeated that the dream had come true. Keiji retorts that it's not his fault. They're all thinking about how strange it is that his dream came true. The trainer yells at them to count louder, making them curse silently under their breath. Another one of Keiji's friends tells him to look over where the U.S. Special Forces are standing. Keiji, sweating profusely, looks where his friend is pointing and recognizes the best combat jacket soldier in the world, Rita Vertowski. Jin looks over too and is shocked to see that Rita is much shorter than he had imagined. Their friend replies that she's the full metal bitch, the one who slaughters all the mimics with ease, and advises Keiji never to judge women by their innocent looks. Keiji just keeps staring at Rita, thinking she looks more like a puppy than someone dangerous. Jin continues the conversation, talking about how people say the U.S. military unit is just propaganda to popularize new weapons and methods. Keiji asks if they're just for show, and Jin confirms it, saying that for that reason, it makes sense for a woman to be the commander. Keiji just hummed as he tried to remember if he had met that girl somewhere before. Jin noticed Keiji's unwavering gaze on Rita and jokingly asked if he liked her. Before he could answer, Keiji was startled when Rita looked at him, their eyes accidentally meeting. He quickly turned away, but Rita started walking towards them, sending them all into a panic. She silently walked past them and approached the instructors who were directing the training session. After asking for permission to speak, she asked if she could join the training session. The officer was surprised by her request, so she explained that she'd never had the chance to participate in this type of training, and she wanted to join the soldiers to ensure tomorrow's operation would go smoothly. The officer agreed, and she turned back, standing right next to Keiji. Keiji felt nervous as Rita spoke up, asking if there was something wrong with her face since he kept staring at her. Keiji stammered that there was nothing wrong. Rita went on to say that she found it strange for someone to look at her like that, and Keiji quickly apologized, saying he wasn't doing it for any particular reason. Rita didn't say anything else while Keiji secretly glanced at her, thinking that she looked just like a normal girl. Soon enough, the training session ended, and as everyone was getting ready to freshen up, Keiji sighed in relief when he saw the training had only lasted 1 hour instead of the 3 hours in his dream. Just then, Jin cheerfully approached Keiji, telling him they were having a party tonight. But Keiji refused, not wanting to tell his friend that he wasn't feeling well, and just wanted to stay in bed. Later, Keiji was lying in bed reading a book, which confused him a little because he had never read this book before, yet the words seemed familiar. He sat up and mumbled that maybe Jin had told him this story before. However, his attention was quickly drawn to the noise from his friends partying in the next room. Keiji was worried about having to face the mimics for the first time tomorrow, and he was also surprised to learn he'd be fighting alongside Rita. He planned to survive the battle and told himself it was just a dream, and that he wouldn't die tomorrow, no matter what. The next morning, as everyone was preparing to move out, the commander announced that they were heading to Kotoyushi Island. Everyone got fully equipped, and the instructors continued to motivate them, emphasizing that they would take back this island. Today, the commander continued, if the mimics invade Tokyo, they will destroy the city within days. Therefore, right now, the soldiers must save the lives of 35 million people. After reminding them that their own families and friends were among them, he ordered them to crush the mimics to pieces. After his speech, they all advanced with their weapons, doing their best to destroy any mimic that stood in their way. Keiji seemed to be struggling in the battle, so the sergeant told him to calm down, saying they just needed to eliminate the mimics that hadn't been destroyed by the main force. Keiji stammered back that he understood, while telling himself that this was a real battle and he needed to focus. Just then, the sergeant pointed ahead and announced that the mimics were coming. Keiji suddenly realized this was the real battlefield, and he started firing his gun along with his comrades. They kept firing their guns relentlessly, and finally Keiji saw some mimics for the first time, witnessing the horde of monsters advancing towards them. Jin yelled that the others must not be doing anything, since there were still so many monsters left. Then, Jin told Keiji to move, saying that if they just sat there, they wouldn't last much longer. Jin quickly moved, trying to get away, but soon after, an explosion went off, crushing him to pieces right before Keiji's eyes. Keiji desperately screamed his friend's name, and when he turned around, he saw the mimics there. Before he could escape, another explosion hit, tearing his arm off. He screamed from the intense pain and the burning sensation, then lay flat on the ground, knowing he would die at any moment. Keiji abruptly woke up in his bed, in the same position as before, his body completely intact. He quickly sat up, horrified by what was happening and trying to understand how he was here again. Suddenly, Jin handed him a piece of paper and asked him to sign it. Keiji glanced at the paper and was stunned to see it was the same request form as before. Just then, he remembered how he had died a horrible death in battle, and he vomited out of disgust. Jin quickly looked down from the top bunk, but Keiji was still trying to figure out what was happening, as it all felt too real to be just a dream. He was pulled from his thoughts when Jin asked if he was feeling okay, since they were heading into battle tomorrow. The repeating events were another shock for Keiji. He quickly opened the book he had been reading, and just as he expected, he could clearly remember specific parts of the scene in the book. But this should have been impossible, since he couldn't dream about parts he hadn't read yet. Seeing Keiji's strange behavior, Jin came to check on him, but Keiji paid him no mind, busy trying to grasp the situation. Keiji remembered having the same dream that morning, one in which his arm was blown off and he died. Now he realized that he might not have been dreaming at all. Keiji despaired, realizing that if he stayed here, he would be sent into battle and die there all over again. Jin called his name, but Keiji didn't hear him. Instead, he started running, desperate to escape this place. He wanted to go anywhere because staying here meant he would have to face that pain all over again. While running, he didn't see the maid, Rachel, and ran into her, knocking her to the ground, with all the vegetables scattering around. Keiji also hit his head on the ground in the fall, but he ignored his injury, even as Rachel pointed out that he was bleeding. He apologized to her and prepared to run off again, but had to stop when the sergeant appeared and asked if he had run into the cart. Keiji admitted that he had, and as the sergeant tried to examine his wound, Keiji shoved the sergeant's hand away, saying he was fine. The sergeant then told him he could skip physical training and ordered him to go to the medical station. Farrell then headed to the barracks to speak with the other soldiers, while Keiji seized the opportunity and fled. He managed to escape the base and felt satisfied with his decision, because if he had stayed, he would have died. He got past the guards easily because their main job was to stop suspicious people from approaching the base, not to pay attention to the young soldiers. He desperately fled from death, continuing to run down the deserted road, hoping to reach a nearby town from which he could get anywhere else. He stopped when he saw an old man and a child walking toward him. The man remarked that it was a surprise to see Keiji, as it was rare for soldiers to be out here. Keiji was also surprised to see civilians, but he remained silent as the old man shared that his granddaughter kept saying the color of the sea looked strange, so he'd come to see if anything was wrong. Keiji finally felt a sense of relief, realizing he had truly escaped the base and was now in the absolute defense zone, where he would be safe. As he was thinking this, a projectile suddenly struck the old man, severing his head right before Keiji's eyes. Keiji stared at the old man, horrified as blood gushed from his neck. The little girl looked up at her grandfather, but just then another beam of light struck, doing the same thing to her. In anguish, Keiji looked to the side and discovered a mimic there. He was shocked to see a lone mimic inside the defense zone, and tried to run, but a beam struck, blowing his leg off, and once again he died. Keiji woke up in his familiar bed, with the same radio broadcast playing in the background. Jin handed him the petition. Keiji sat up, his head bowed low, and asked Jin if he had a gun. Jin, surprised by Keiji's sudden interest in weapons, handed him the gun, and warned him to be careful because it was loaded. Jin added that Keiji would be issued one when he was promoted to corporal, but also noted that the gun wasn't very effective against the mimics. Suddenly, Jin's eyes widened in shock as Keiji pointed the gun into his own mouth and pulled the trigger. Keiji died once again, and as expected, he woke up in the same situation. This time, he just lay there, finally realizing that no matter how he died, time would still loop, bringing him back to this day with his memories fully intact. Keiji couldn't understand why this was happening in this world. He turned to Jin and asked what would happen if things just kept repeating like this. Jin was confused by the question, so Keiji explained that it was like going back to the start in a board game. Finally understanding what Keiji meant, Jin replied that it would depend on what was happening during those repeating events. He stressed that he himself would never want to experience the Okinawa landing operation again, not even if his life was on the line. Keiji didn't answer, just quietly thought about how even if he were put before a firing squad, he would still come back just like this. He wondered what his friends would think if they knew, since he was clearly the only one trapped in the loop, facing the fear of death every single day. A sudden sense of determination washed over him, and he told himself he would try to survive. If this was the only way to get revenge on this world, he would fight to the very end. Sitting up in his bed, Keiji started to keep a tally of how many times he had died, and wrote the number 5 on his hand. To him, this small number was the starting point in his battle against his fate. He remembered back to when he was a kid, often playing hero and fighting aliens. Among his friends, Keiji was always the one who played the sacrificing hero, charging forward to face the enemy, taking all the hits to encourage the others to keep fighting and win. Back then, it was just a children's game revolving around the idea of death. But now, having experienced dying and coming back to life 4 times, Keiji understood that real death was nothing like that old game. It was incredibly painful, and he didn't want to be a hero in this battle. He was determined not to let himself die over and over again, and as he held a push-up position, his only goal was to survive the coming battle. But he still had no idea how to do that when faced with the brutal mimics. His train of thought was interrupted when Jin told him to look to the side where the U.S. forces were standing. Keiji's eyes followed Rita, the soldier who fought in the most powerful armor. Jin commented that she was just a poster girl, but Keiji knew that was a lie. He remembered his first death, the one he had thought was just a dream. He had seen Rita fighting then. She was holding a giant axe, fighting fiercely and slaughtering the mimics without mercy. Keiji recalled the suit Rita wore that day and a vague conversation in his mind. Back then, as he lay dying, Rita had unexpectedly asked if the green tea served after a meal in Japan was free. He had tried to answer, but couldn't. And Rita went on to say that she'd gotten into trouble before for believing everything written in books. Rita explained that she had read about Japanese culture and now wanted to hear a native's opinion. She then urged Keiji to take a deep breath, but instead he just blurted out, asking if he was going to die here. Rita answered bluntly, "Yes, you will." After introducing herself, she reassured him that she would stay by his side until his last breath. Keiji's eyes went white with despair, as Rita continued, saying that when he died, she would remove the power pack from his suit, and advised him to just let go instead of trying to fight death. Just then, a voice came over the radio, as other soldiers announced that Sector Alpha was secure and they were ready for the pizza. Keiji was bewildered to hear them talking about pizza in a situation like this, but he didn't have time to understand what it meant. As a group of mimics suddenly attacked, Rita immediately grabbed her weapon, ordering Keiji to stay put as she charged in to confront the mimics. With her giant axe, she cut down one mimic after another with swift precision, leaving Keiji stunned by her speed and strength. While Rita fought, Keiji, though still terrified, began to move slowly. He told himself that before he died, he had to kill at least one mimic to prove his worth. Keiji managed to get up and take down one mimic, but immediately after, he was hit by another attack and faced death once again. Back in the present, he recalled Rita's strength and understood why she was able to survive every battle. As for him, all he'd managed to do was kill one mimic before dying. Jin pulled him out of his thoughts again, remarking that Rita had only shown up to make them all feel useless. Keiji was confused by that, because he remembered that she was supposed to have joined the training drill and stood right next to him, but things had played out differently. Keiji realized that this difference was because he hadn't stared at her like he did last time. This discovery made him understand that he could change the events of the future. When Keiji returned to the barracks, he reflected on the exhausting 3-hour training session he had just endured. But this time, he silently decided that he wouldn't let things repeat like that again. Keiji decided to come up with a plan to get to know Rita, hoping he could convince her to shorten the training time to just 1 hour. At the same time, he realized that even though he was in a time loop, he was still just a weak rookie. Thinking about how to get stronger, Keiji glanced around and saw his comrades playing chess. One of them was complaining to Jin about constantly losing, even suggesting that Jin should just play blindfolded. Jin just laughed, replying that he preferred to go with his gut. However, he was reminded that if a new player did that, they'd never win. Keiji listened intently as another player explained the importance of changing tactics and learning the opponent's every move. "It's like a secret code that anyone can decipher with regular practice," the player said. These words sparked a new realization in Keiji. To survive on the battlefield, he needed to improve his combat skills. Determined to act immediately, Keiji stood up and went to find Sergeant Farrell. Keiji knew that Farrell had been at this base the longest and was the most seasoned soldier, having survived longer than anyone else. When Keiji didn't say anything, Farrell asked if he was nervous about deploying tomorrow. Keiji thought about how Farrell used to be a trainer and was the only one who could help him. Finally, breaking the silence, he asked Farrell that since he still maintained his own training regimen, if he could join him. Farrell replied that it would be useless, but upon seeing the confused look on Keiji's face, he changed his mind. He quoted an old saying, "Defeat the enemy and learn." He explained that a skilled warrior who has killed countless enemies in many battles should continue to kill, because real experience is the only way to learn. He concluded that soldiers who survive a battle will learn their lessons from it. Keiji chuckled softly, thinking about how he had all the time in the world to fight battles. Farrell found Keiji's smile confusing, and Keiji quickly apologized to him. While thinking about how he was trapped in a time loop, he realized he could train himself by fighting in real battles over and over again, since he had infinite time. Keiji was confident that if he kept training, one day he would reach the level of Rita and those other legendary warriors. Farrell was still weirded out by his smile and expression, but he told him to come back in 15 minutes in his level 1 gear. A bit confused, Keiji asked if he really needed to wear it, and got an earful from Farrell, who barked that a soldier can't train without his gear. Keiji realized he was stuck in a time loop after his first battle. After struggling for a while, he had figured out a few rules for this loop. The first rule: when he died, he would return to the day before the battle. And no matter where he died, this rule never changed. He also realized that there was no escaping this loop, and no matter how many times he died, it would continue. He would remember everything. The final rule of this loop was that the future could change each time. If he wanted to escape this loop, he had to become strong enough to defeat death, and to do that, he needed to improve his combat skills. Until now, he was just an ordinary rookie, but everything changed since he started waking up after every death. Right now, he was on his 12th loop, and was running across the battlefield without any fear. His comrades were worried he'd get himself killed if he kept running like that, but Keiji paid them no mind, because he knew that running was more important than dying. When he started training with Sergeant Farrell, the first thing he learned was how to walk in the armor. Farrell told him to turn off the auto-balancer, which confused Keiji, since the balancer was what helped him stay upright. Farrell explained that the auto-balancer would slow his movement slightly, and Keiji was well aware that this tiny delay could mean death on the battlefield. After that training session, he ran across the battlefield and died 7 times. Now, on his 12th loop, he could run across the battlefield without any trouble. Despite his speed, he was still surrounded by a swarm of mimics and died. After entering the next loop, his next goal was to learn how to attack. He recalled how armored soldiers were issued different weapons, starting with a 20mm cannon. It was powerful enough to tear a person to pieces, but it was useless against the mimics. Missiles and fuel air grenades had no effect. And the only weapon that worked against the mimics was the pile driver, which fired tungsten carbide alloy rounds. Having decided on a weapon, Keiji went to the medical bay and informed the guard there that he wanted to use his armor for training. The guard was surprised by Keiji's request and thought he should be resting since he had a battle tomorrow. When Keiji insisted, the guard argued that if he wanted to use a pile driver, he'd have to get close to the mimics to hit them. Keiji didn't feel too disgusted by the idea of getting close to those mimics. And when he returned to the battle once more, he spotted a lone mimic, a perfect target. He approached it quietly, determined to get closer. But just as he was about to grab his weapon, the mimic shot a bolt of lightning at his face. Keiji jolted awake in his bed, causing a startled Jin to rush over and check if he was okay. Keiji didn't answer, keeping calm and reminding himself that he couldn't be afraid. Death was his ally. He continued to practice killing mimics, and he was ecstatic. He had finally managed to take one down during his 21st loop. His first kill gave him a new wave of motivation, and he was determined to become stronger so he could kill even more mimics. He snapped out of his thoughts when he saw Jin struggling to hold his ground against a mimic. Keiji acted quickly and used his pile driver, destroying the mimic. His friend Jin was surprised to see him fight like that, but Keiji ignored him and ran off, after warning Jin to be careful because more mimics were coming from the east. The other soldiers just stood there in amazement, murmuring about how they never knew Keiji was so strong. Weapon in hand, Keiji kept moving, thinking about how he'd become a soldier so strong that even Farrell would be impressed. Despite his strength, he kept dying over and over, and he knew there was only one reason for it. On his 47th loop, Keiji knelt behind a bush near the armory and noticed the familiar guards with their M16s. Keiji was looking for something because the pile driver wasn't very efficient. It only had 20 rounds, which meant he could only take out a limited number of mimics. All the times he died were because he ran out of ammo and he needed a weapon with no limits. To get that, he needed to see the person in the armory. Just as the company commander's vehicle he was waiting for appeared, he replayed the sequence of events that was about to unfold. In his mind, Keiji knew when the guards would salute the commander. That's when he could start moving. The vehicle would head toward the fork in the road, and at the same time, the janitor would come out from around the corner. The guards would glance toward the vehicle, which was his cue to quickly slip past them. One of the guards would turn back to look at him, but his view would be blocked by the other guard's large body. Following the usual sequence of events, Keiji easily slipped into the armory and found a girl working on some weapons. When Keiji greeted her, the girl was startled by his voice and accidentally dropped her glasses. He helped her put her glasses back on, and as she stood up, she introduced herself as Shasta Rayleigh. Keiji replied that he knew who she was, and that's exactly why he came to see her. Shasta tried to turn him down, thinking Keiji wanted something else, but he quickly pointed to a weapon, saying that's what he wanted. She was confused by his request, as Keiji confirmed that he wanted a battle axe just like Rita's. He was pleased with his decision, as he was tired of running out of ammo and needed a weapon that wouldn't run dry on the battlefield. Shasta couldn't believe he actually wanted the axe, but as Keiji assured her, she flatly refused his request, citing her current workload and inability to create a weapon on the spot. Keiji, unfazed, nodded silently, admiring her accomplishments as a top lieutenant and a tech prodigy who had graduated from MIT at a young age. She was Rita's personal technician, so it was hard to get a meeting with her. Keiji suddenly pulled a memory chip from his pocket, asking Shasta if she needed it. She tried to snatch it from his hand, but he quickly raised his arm above his head, keeping it out of her reach. Shasta desperately demanded he give it to her, and Keiji agreed, but on one condition. She had to build him a battle axe. Shasta stopped trying to snatch it, and politely told him he'd get hurt if he tried to imitate Rita, as she was the only one who could handle such a weapon. Shasta told him the battle axe weighed up to 200 kilograms, and the inertia from swinging such a heavy axe would damage his body. She went on to explain that Rita didn't use an auto-balancer when wielding the weapon, because she paid attention to every minute movement. Shasta revealed that Rita's jacket didn't even have an auto-balancer installed, and that she was the only one who could pull that off, even in the special forces. Despite the warning, Keiji calmly said that removing the auto-balancer was a good idea, and told her that he didn't use one either. She asked sharply if he was trying to be Rita's successor, adding that Rita didn't care what others thought of her. She recalled the first time they met. Rita had told her that she was happy to be living in this age of war. She asked Keiji if he could say the same, then suddenly realized something, and hastily added that she wasn't afraid of Rita. She tried to say something else, but Keiji stopped her, saying he knew Rita wasn't as cold as everyone made her out to be. He went on to say that he didn't want the axe because of Rita, but because he needed a weapon that wouldn't run out of ammo like a pile driver. This finally got Shasta's attention, as Keiji said he'd be fine with a spear or a cutting blade, since he just needed a weapon that would help him survive the battle. Shasta was surprised by Keiji's strange declaration, and she realized that Rita might have said something similar. Keiji humbly accepted the comparison to Rita, and repeatedly promised Shasta that he had the weapon situation under control. But just as Shasta started to panic, she snatched the chip from his hand and rushed off to craft a makeshift weapon from scrap steel. While making the weapon, Shasta said that Keiji was the only one who understood the distance between him and Rita, and still wanted to overcome it. Remembering something, she asked him about the number written on his hand. Her question caught Keiji by surprise, and he eventually replied that it was something like marking a day on a calendar. Shasta commented that it must be something important if he wrote it on his hand, then asked if it was his girlfriend's birthday. He denied it, saying that wasn't it, and that if he had to explain, the number represented the days since his last death. Keiji felt relieved to finally have his battle axe, and even though he might die while using it, what mattered was that the mimics could be wiped out with just one swing of this axe. Keiji swung the axe around, effectively destroying all the mimics, but his reckless actions cost Sergeant Farrell his life. He kept returning to that same day and now had the same schedule he followed every single day, from waking up at 6 a.m. to going to sleep. Everything except for training was the same each day, and by now, he could even follow the schedule in his sleep. The onion soup in the cafeteria always spilled on him in the exact same way. Now, as he returned to his table with his soup, he heard some soldiers complimenting the soup in front of Rachel, the cook. At first, Keiji also found the soup delicious, but now, after eating it for 80 days, he was sick of it and only ate for the energy, along with a headache. Keiji looked up when he heard some soldiers talking about Rita entering the mess hall. Without looking at a clock, he knew instantly that it was 11:40. As always, Rita was having lunch a few tables away from him. Every day he watched her eat. And though he didn't intentionally choose to do this, that's just how things turned out. He had memorized the events, knowing exactly when Rita would fail to pick up a single bean, and when she would eat a salted apricot. He stared at her back, thinking about how childishly she acted despite being 22 years old, and told himself she'd look really cute if she wore normal clothes. He was surprised when another large soldier approached and asked sharply if he was enjoying his meal. Keiji calmly replied, "It's normal for food to taste good when you're surrounded by good people," while thinking to himself that this was the first time someone had tried to pick a fight with him. The soldier yelled that he looked like he was eating something disgusting and that the food was the only interesting thing here. But Keiji's face was just frightening. He remained silent as the soldiers pulled him to his feet, causing his soup to spill. Rachel quickly approached, yelling for them to stop. and told the soldier he had crossed a line. He quickly let go of Keiji and told Rachel that she was the one who said how sad Keiji looked while eating. Hearing the argument, Keiji looked at his reflection on his plate and was surprised to see how miserable he looked. Trying to de-escalate the conflict, Rachel offered Keiji a shrimp, but the soldier pushed her hand away and grabbed Keiji again, saying he still had to deal with him. When the soldier tried to attack him, Keiji quickly sidestepped, causing the soldier to crash into the chairs. He calmly handed the shrimp back to Rachel. The soldier immediately got up, and the other soldiers cheered for them to fight. He lunged forward to punch Keiji again, but the attack had no effect. Keiji moved with complete calm, thinking that those who don't cherish every second would never reach his level. Jin and his friends bet on Keiji to win, but Keiji kept remembering Farrell's words, that he had to meticulously analyze every single second, because time couldn't be stretched, but instead, each moment had to be carved into a piece of value. Keiji was confident he could prepare himself by predicting what would happen next, and easily turn the tables in his favor. He moved constantly, dodging every attack from the burly soldier, who was growing angrier and angrier with Keiji's evasions. After carefully observing his opponent's movements, Keiji knew he was about to throw a left hook, a blow Keiji easily dodged just by tilting his upper body. Looking at the soldier, Keiji could see all the openings he could attack, but the soldier was completely unaware of his true strength. After dodging another punch, Keiji's friend encouraged him to fight back, but Keiji knew that if he won this fight, the soldier would just keep coming after him, which would interfere with his training. He decided to take a punch. And just as Rachel tried to step between them, Keiji was punched in the face and fell to the ground. His friends quickly gathered around him, groaning that they'd lost their bets. Meanwhile, Rita finally stood up from her table, surprising everyone as she complimented Keiji's movements. When Keiji came to, he saw Rachel standing over him, asking if he was all right as his eye began to swell. He slowly sat up and told Rachel he was fine. She seemed relieved to see he was okay and apologized on the burly soldier's behalf, saying he wasn't actually such a bad guy. Keiji quickly replied that he was the one who should be sorry, then asked her if he really looked like he was attending a funeral during lunch. Rachel answered honestly that he did look like he was attending a funeral, which made Keiji remember his previous loop. Sergeant Farrell had been killed because of his own selfish actions. For Keiji, it really was a funeral. However, he didn't say that out loud, only replying that he would try not to make the same mistake again. He was surprised when Rachel asked why he didn't fight back, saying it was clear he had the upper hand but wasn't using his full strength. Keiji replied calmly that he was saving his strength for the real battle. Suddenly changing the subject, Rachel asked if he was seeing anyone, and when he said no, she offered to stay with him tonight since he was heading into battle tomorrow. She quickly added that she doesn't make that kind of offer to just anyone. But Keiji refused, saying he wasn't the man she was looking for. He then said he needed to go train, and ran off, leaving Rachel sitting there. As he ran, he couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, how she reminded him of a librarian. He used to have a secret crush on her back in high school. Back then, he'd been left in a pretty bad state, but that had nothing to do with why he joined the United Defense Force. He liked to think he wasn't some pathetic guy who couldn't express his feelings. Keiji kept running and burst into the training room, where Sergeant Farrell was repeating his familiar lines. Keiji was overjoyed to see him alive, and recalled the librarian's words from before, that we only live once, and if that were the case for him, he would have chosen to stay with Rachel all night. He shouted out, asking Farrell if he could train with him, accepting that this was his life now. In the 99th loop, he died 45 minutes after the battle began. In the 110th loop, he realized Jin was the weak link in their formation, which helped him figure out how to break through. In the 123rd loop, his headache, which had started back in the 5th loop, grew even worse, but he kept pushing his deadly attacks. As the number of loops increased, he was able to survive longer on the battlefield. He realized he'd lost consciousness 8 minutes into the battle, and even though he hadn't died, time still looped. All Keiji could do was accept his fate. In the 158th loop, Keiji was like the wind, tearing through the swarm of mimics, surprising his comrades with his movements. Jin commented that he thought Keiji was just carrying the axe for fun. Sergeant Farrell ordered everyone that from now on, the 17th Company would provide backup for Keiji, and told them not to get in his way while he fought the mimics. Everyone followed his orders, and Keiji informed Farrell that he was heading into battle, while thinking about how he was no longer a weak soldier. He had become a machine that ran on blood instead of oil, a soldier who could bend the events of war to his will. Keiji leaped through the air, slicing through any mimics that got in his way, shocking the U.S. base unit. As they detected the Japanese unit from the north approaching the Alpha server, something they never expected to happen. Keiji continued toward the battlefield. He saw a soldier lying there with a piece of metal stuck in his shoulder. To distract the soldier, Keiji asked him if he remembered the football game between their units a few months ago and how they had lost. The soldier was surprised to hear such a strange, unrelated question. But Keiji continued, saying it was a record for an internal match. Then, Keiji admitted that he didn't want to talk like this, preparing to say something else, but he stopped. Instead, he advised the soldier to take a deep breath. The soldier was confused by Keiji's strange questions, but seeing that he was speaking normally now, Keiji helped him to his feet and said that he owed this soldier a favor. The soldier said he was being rude, but Keiji just laughed, saying they could only hope to get lucky. He continued running onto the battlefield, remembering the first time he almost died. Back then, Rita had kept him calm by talking nonsense about green tea. Suddenly, an explosion went off a few meters away from him, and he instantly knew that Rita was there. Because every time she appeared, there was always an explosion that destroyed everything around. As he predicted, Rita emerged from the smoke and dust and declared that the area was clear. Keiji understood that the soldiers felt a surge of hope seeing Rita in her familiar red jacket, and it seemed they had all fallen for her. He now knew that they had nicknamed her the Full Metal Bitch as a sign of respect. He admitted that he himself was starting to have feelings for Rita, but luckily those feelings were one-sided. He wasn't in a position to fall in love because even if he did, the time with that person would be lost when he entered another loop. Just then, a mimic appeared in front of them, and Keiji was surprised to realize that, for some reason, he recognized this mimic as the one that had killed him. For the first time, Keiji felt a hint of joy facing that mimic, because now he could show it the power he had gained. Suddenly, a voice came over the radio, and he was surprised to recognize it as Rita's. Seeing his surprised expression, Rita confirmed that she was talking to him, and then asked how many loops he had been through. Illinois is a small town with a population of about 4,000 and a vast, beautiful sky. This is where Rita spent her childhood, with average grades in middle school, a strong hatred for green peppers, and a talent for horseshoes. One day, while working in the fields with her father, she looked a little sad, which worried him. He promised to take her into town later. Rita was also very good at pretending to be sad, which made her a normal girl, just like most of the population of America. As promised, her father took her into town that evening and bought some coffee bean while Rita eagerly looked at the jewelry. Just then, the news came on, announcing that the army had been pushed out of Hawaii and was falling back to the base in San Francisco. The old shopkeeper told the girl's father that he had brought in some rare goods yesterday after hearing the news about Hawaii. Her father replied that he was sure the mimics wouldn't attack a town like this, but he was also curious about what would happen. He went on to talk about how scientists thought the mimics were aliens, but since there was no way to communicate with them, it seemed the war would last until one side was annihilated. The shopkeeper replied that he understood and asked if he could beat the mimics with jujitsu, which he used to practice. He laughed when he heard that, saying it was a long time ago. The shopkeeper then turned to the girl, asking if she planned to join the army since she was his daughter. The girl was about to answer, but cut her father off, saying she wouldn't join the army because she liked living in this town. That night, a heavy snow covered the town, an unusually cold winter night. The girl woke up to a strange sound and rushed to look out the window. She was horrified when she saw a giant monster attacking the villagers. She took a step back, and just then, her father burst through the door, hurriedly pulling her away. When they got out of the house, she saw the entire town in flames and mimics attacking the people. Her father quickly led her to an underground cellar and told her not to come out no matter what happened. She looked at her father for a moment, but then she noticed her mother lying there, with a large wound in her stomach. She rushed to her mother's side, telling her to hold on. Outside the cellar, her father got into his car and rammed it into a mimic to destroy it. But just then, other mimics attacked him from the side. Hearing the noise, the girl peeked through the glass door and saw her father trying to get the mimic's attention, encouraging it to attack him instead of his family. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she watched her father take his last breaths, muttering that he wanted her to survive. When help arrived sometime later, soldiers found her there. She rushed back to her mother, but completely broke down when she realized her mother had also passed away. She just stood there, staring blankly at the bodies of the townspeople. The attack was carried out by 3 scout mimics, which burned the entire town, killing 15 people. The defense force arrived 3 hours after the attack. She lost everything in that attack, and a distant relative took her in. At that time, everyone who was 18 years old had the right to join the defense force, but she was too young to apply. The girl stole the passport of a refugee named Rita, who was 3 years older than her, and went straight to the military recruitment office. She had nothing left to live for, and her only goal was to kill every mimic on the planet. 6 months after joining the army, Rita was caught in a time loop for the first time. When the mimics pass through a place, everything becomes lifeless and the water turns a murky green. These mimics ate the soil, drank the water, and spat out a substance that was toxic to life on Earth, but beneficial to the alien organisms. Everyone knows that all creatures change their environment by cutting down trees and farming the land. They think of a suitable environment to build their homes, and eventually their DNA adapts to the new environment. 6 months after joining the United Defense Force, Rita was transferred to a squad full of veterans. One day in battle, she was injured and was approached by Lieutenant Arthur, who kept the team's morale up. He talked with her briefly about how nomads in China would mix animal blood into their tea, and that they were the ones who conquered most of Asia during the Middle Ages. Taken aback by his story, Rita slowly stood up as Arthur continued, explaining that these nomads were the source of the rumors about vampires. He suddenly asked her if she was feeling down because of his story, and when Rita assured him she was fine, he returned to the battlefield. She watched his retreating figure, thinking to herself how he had told that little story just to distract her. Just then, she spotted a strange mimic with an antenna on its back, and immediately realized it was completely different from the other mimics. Before she could even process what was happening, Rita found herself standing in a bathroom. She frantically ran out of the stall and realized she had 30 hours until she had to be on the battlefield. Even though she was just standing there, that was her first loop, and she had experienced it after killing that strange mimic. Entering the second loop, she quickly found that mimic, determined to see if time would really reset if she killed it. Her suspicions were confirmed when she found herself standing in the bathroom once again. In the third loop, she was still confused about what was happening and thought that maybe this was all just a dream. By the 8th loop, she started trying to figure out a way to escape this loop. During the 12th loop, she wondered if the first mimic was the key to these loops. But every time she returned, there were more and more mimics protecting that special one. During the battle, Rita noticed a dead soldier in the group, which surprised her because he had been alive in the previous loop. Just then, she was attacked by a mimic and sent back to another loop. Rita realized her 20mm rifle wasn't very effective, and that she would die if she faced all those mimics head-on. She was determined to learn more about these mimics and wanted to review all research documents, rumors, or anything that could give her even the smallest piece of information. She also wanted to replace her 20mm rifle and went to see Shasta to discuss it. Shasta informed her that reports showed the mimic's skin was evolving. At the same time, she showed Rita a new weapon prototype, saying it fired stakes. Rita cut her off, saying she needed a weapon that would never run out of ammo, as she thought about needing something that could kill all the mimics on the battlefield. It was then that she received her axe, and began to destroy every mimic she faced. Finally, she began to understand that the secret behind the mimic's power lay within this loop. It was proof of her theory that the strange mimic remembered her movements from the previous loop, and then reinforced its guards to stop her in the new loop. She realized the mimics were constantly rewinding time to fight against humans, just like hitting the reset button in a video game when you're stuck in a difficult situation. This made the battle much easier for them, but if they were really doing that, there had to be some rules about how this whole thing worked. She was determined to solve this mystery as she recalled Arthur's dying face. Rita was resolved to escape this loop and win the battle. She stood there watching Arthur as he showed everyone a picture of his newborn child. The other soldiers congratulated him, saying he would definitely be a great father. Rita muttered her congratulations too, but she was tired of repeating this every single day and had lost count. While everyone was still gushing over the photo, she remembered Arthur's dead body and ran off, clutching her head from an intense headache. The pain seemed to get worse with every loop, making her wonder confusedly if it was related to the time loop. Just then, she found a report on the mimics, which mentioned particles that could travel through time. She was still puzzled about how these mimics kept repeating the loop, lost in her own thoughts. She wasn't paying attention to Shasta and accidentally bumped into her, knocking everything out of her hands. Hurrying to apologize, Rita reached out to help, but Shasta ignored her, worried only about whether the chips were broken. Rita was surprised because this hadn't happened in the previous loop. She asked Shasta if these things were important. Shasta replied that they were extremely important, as they were external memory units. Noticing Rita's confused look, she explained that these devices were essentially high-tech diaries for soldiers, recording every little detail, from their heart rate to their combat strategies. Rita curiously asked about the purpose of this monitoring. and Shasta responded that it was all stored in the Defense Force's database for strategic planning, helping them use it for future campaigns. Rita finally understood that the mimics were doing the same thing as these monitoring devices, and she helped Shasta gather the scattered chips. Before leaving, Shasta turned back and called Rita a star, an important soldier. She also mentioned having a backup of her data in case the server went down. Rita's eyes lit up when she heard that, as she finally realized that the mimic with the antenna was acting as a mimic server, analyzing the situation and then rewinding time. If that was the case, there must be a mimic backup to record everything. When she returned after destroying the server mimic, it meant there was still a backup mimic active. She concluded that it had to be a mimic network and was thrilled to have finally found a clue to solve this mystery. Rita realized she had to destroy the entire mimic network to escape this loop, and to do that, she needed to follow a specific sequence. When she went into battle the next time, the first step was to destroy the server mimic's antenna, as that was the part emitting the tachyon particles. The second step was to eliminate the backup mimics. And the final step was to destroy the server mimic itself. When she completed all the steps, Rita was overjoyed to realize she was no longer looping. However, Rita's joy at escaping the loop vanished when she discovered that Arthur had died in battle. She stood silently watching the soldiers mourning over Arthur's body, unable to understand why he had to die in this loop. Heartbroken, Rita blamed herself, thinking she should have realized this sooner, because she had seen that scene before. After experiencing the time loop, Rita became aware that she could change fate and save some people in the future, but there were still many she couldn't save. She understood that there's no war where everyone survives, and concluded that everything leads to death. After the battle in Florida, a top-secret research team was formed to study the time loop. They performed a detailed analysis of Rita's body, especially her brain, after she had gone through so many loops and been exposed to tachyon particles. Rita's brain structure had changed. It was all just an accident. But when Rita destroyed the server mimics for the first time, her exposure to the tachyon particles triggered the time loop. This was a stroke of luck for her and for humanity, because after gaining the power to control time, she traveled the world, becoming the only weapon against those mimics. After 211 loops, Rita had become incredibly strong and reached heights no one else could touch. Her sole purpose was to destroy all the mimics and bring victory to humanity. To achieve her goal, she continued to fight alone. Standing in the high-up waiting room of the Flowerline base, she watched the soldiers training, her eyes landing on Keiji, who was struggling to hold his stance. This was their first meeting, neither of them aware of the other's loops. "This is me, a nobody,"